Welcome to BevCam's production of Conversations with Candidates. I'm Gina Coburn, your host for this segment. Today we'll be talking to Todd Rotondo, who is candidate for Councilor at Large. Todd, welcome to the show.
Welcome, thanks for having me.
First question we have for you is, why are you running for office?
I've been very involved with the city through having my business in the city, the school departments and what have you. And I feel that I can bring more to the table. Even though I've served on numerous ad hoc committees and my involvement, you still don't always necessarily get a voice heard. And so there was an initial knee-jerk reaction to an issue that was brought to our attention as a restaurant owner. And that kind of got me into really considering it again. So with that being done, my brother Michael and I, we're partners in a restaurant together, we spoke of this and we really started sitting down about it and seeing how else we could have other people's voices heard. Because it seems that over the past several years, there's less transparency with the council and the administration, and when an issue does come up, it's almost as if it's too late. The Broom Lab project, what have you, the liquor licenses. So that was one of the things that really got me wanting to get involved with it.
What do you think are the most pressing issues that would, if you're elected, would be facing Beverly while you were serving on the council?
Well, it's a continuous thing. It's the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean just the sidewalks and the roads. We all know they're in deteriorate. But it's also, we have to complete a middle school, which hasn't even gotten to that point yet. I think our police station needs to really be addressed. I think we've been putting that off for the last 20 years, that we've continually said, yeah, we'll get there, we'll get there. I know that we bonded a lot of money. A lot of this bonding will be coming off with the schools that we've completed, the elementary. The high school is beautiful. I think the waterfront's going to be an issue, and not a negative issue. I think it's whether there will actually be just a restaurant there. I think the current owners of the Port Marine need to be really sat with, and hopefully that the new administration will be able to make better compromises. I know there are other things besides just the fact of putting a mixed-use building there. I mean, a restaurant's not going to make the vibrancy of that waterfront. That's just not the only thing. It's got to be numerous mixed uses, retail, the boating that they've talked about, the paddle boats, what have you. I know that it's the federal and the state channels that need to be looked at in order for it to really work. But I think that's another major issue. And then our lack of, basically our personnel. We don't have enough staffing on our DPWs. I mean, we have 40-something guys. We only have 46 patrolmen. We have, so we don't have a lot. We've gone down in size, and they do a great job. They're professional, but we really need to see if there are ways of better staffing these departments, give them a little more resources that they haven't been able to really work with. They're working thinly, but they're doing a bang-up job with what we have.
And what would be at the top of your agenda?
The infrastructure. I mean, that's something that really needs to be addressed. And I know the engineer department, they really have a plan in place in regards to the grading and of each roadway. Maybe not necessarily it's the best, but it is they're trying to get into a program of it. And like I said, when I said infrastructure, I also mean the middle school, the police station, just the regular maintenance of our current buildings. Sometimes we would negate it because it's the easiest way to take money out if we're short on a budget. You take it from maintenance and building.
For people who aren't familiar with you, and I know you're a local business owner and many people are, but for those of us who aren't, what would you say your style is? And how that style would translate into?
My style is, I am honest. And you may not always like my answer, but I will be truthful with you. Sometimes I need to get a better filter system. I tend to say things before I think of what I should have said. But I'm only telling you the truth. I'll never have a reason to think of, did I say that correctly? Because I'm not lying about it. So my style has always been the truth. I'm a hard worker. I mean, I've always been a hard worker. You get me, you're getting 110% of me. I'm not going to give you 50%. You're going to see me there. I'm going to work it. I'm going to be a voice for you. I'll be able to be reached because I am at the restaurant 70 hours a week. So it's not as if I'm hiding somewhere and you can't get in touch with me. If you can't get me on the phone, you can stop in and say, hey, Todd, you know. So that's an advantage I have, in my opinion.
So the city council and the mayor are responsible for making decisions on roughly a $105 million budget. What specific skills do you feel you have that would qualify you to participate in this budgeting process?
I've been a small business owner for 20 years now. Granted, it's not a $106 million budget, but it is a budget that I have to learn to work within if the economy is on a downturn and I see that a customer is not coming in because people don't have the disposable cash to go out for dinner. I have to learn to work within my means to cut back a little bit, learn how to save money, where I can, if it's a matter of going to a different payroll company and saying, okay, all right, it's only a $20 savings a month, but that translates to $240 over the course of the year. A little bit here, a little bit there. Again, I'm not saying it's $106 million, but it's the same idea. The philosophy behind it is the same.
So when you hear the term fiscal responsibility, what does that mean to you? To
me, it means that you don't spend beyond your means. And that's why when people, what's your views? Well, I am fiscally conservative, responsible, if you want to say it that way. I don't go off and take my charge card and just keep spending, not knowing if I'm going to have money to cover it. I know that if I use my charge card, that I actually have savings that in the event that something happens to me, I can still pay my bills. I have a responsibility to my family, to my wife, to make sure that if something ever happened to me, I still maintain my household. So that's kind of how I feel what that means.
And you would extend that to the city?
Well, obviously, yes, we would have to. I mean, you have a $106 million budget. It comes from different means, your taxes, state funding, federal funding, what have you. So you have a budget to work and live within. So again, like I said, we've been talking about 20 years for a police station, but we had the city prioritized what they felt was more in need. We did our parks, they're all beautiful. They were deteriorating, they need to be upgraded. We needed new elementary schools, again, they were deteriorating, so we went on a project. So those all got renovated, created a new one. High school is beautiful. I mean, we're a model school now for the state. And I think that's still going to be the same with the middle school. And everything that's been done currently has been within the budgets. They haven't gone over budgets. They haven't been overrun. So I think I can continue doing that, working with the council and the mayor.
So in balancing the budget, what are the most critical factors? Like, where do you think there's leverage?
One thing, and it's funny, I had this discussion with a couple of people. I don't quite understand why we're not investigating into looking for a grant writer. I believe one time, years ago, was a grant writer who, there's federal money out there, there's state money, there's plenty of money for public safety, for the Public Works Department, in all means. And I know my wife, who works for the town of Manchester, she writes grants, and she gets a lot of it. So I don't understand why we're not utilizing that. It's almost as being you're not taking a responsibility that we may be able to hire a person, whether it be a part-time person or full-time. That's something you'd have to investigate and see what the roles are. But there is plenty of grant money that we're not taking advantage of. I mean, the fire department just wrote a grant up on their own, and I believe they hired 3 full-time firefighters because of it. So I know there's money out there, and I think that's one of the things we could look into growing. I mean, obviously, we're always going to have to try to get more federal money and lobby the state government and what have you. But there's only so much to go around before we start raising more taxes, and people can't afford to raise, and we can't afford to pay all these extra taxes now.
So, what are the top 1 to 2 to 3 budget issues that you see are going to be facing the city in the next 2 years?
Growth. I mean, we're talking about the Brimble Ave project, and there's it's quality of life issues up there, but I mean, truth be told, we need to have responsible growth. We need to do it. I mean, we would not have a high school if we didn't develop Cummings Center, and that was a factor back when I first moved into the city. People were against it. The traffic's going to be uncontrollable, all this. Well, that adds $2 million a year to our tax base. That allows us to bond the high school and keep it within good standings. Again, the waterfront. We need to really have good conversations with the current owner. Seeing, can we work this together? I mean, we need to get a better deal to grow the bases on that. I mean, so those two things I think are major projects that are in the pipeline that could be used to help maximize our tax dollars without putting the burden on the residents, exception of the quality of life up at the Broom Lab project.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, if you want, I mean, the Brimble Ave project, as I said, I mean, we had the same issue down on the Cummings Center. There is a lot of traffic up there. I'll grant that. You know, it's tough to get to 1A. It's you know, I think people are more in favor of the Phase 2 project because it will open up 70 acres of city land to be developed. It will put an interchange. But I think the Brimble Lab project, I mean, the project's been, now it's just going through the permitted process of it. And it's addressing a safety issue that they were taking a grade F road and changing the interchange to a grade A road. And it's $5 million in funding that's not coming out of the city's money. So I think that's a favorable aspect of it. You know, like I said, I'm just reading and hearing more and more about it as it's unraveling. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, this was one of the things that it just blindsided all these residents when it came about, and that's where I was talking about with the transparency and openness and communicating. Communicating is a big, major factor.
So you've talked a little bit about development in Beverly, and the next set of questions will be on that. We're off the budget for a while. What is your overall view on the need and potential for development in Beverly?
If we want to continue with projects within the city to grow the infrastructure, to keep funding our school systems and our public works departments, we need to grow our tax base. Can't stay stagnant because, you know, costs go up. You know, when they were doing paving 7 years ago, asphalt wasn't at the price that it was now. It's much more higher. So we need, I mean, there's only several places where we can truly develop. In the ones that we've just spoken just a few minutes ago. We need to do responsible development in order to grow our tax base without putting the burden on the residents.
So you just led into the next question. You mentioned responsible development. So what are the issues when considering development that you think are the issues that need to be considered when you're going to be, if you're on the council and you're going to be faced with a development project?
Well, it depends on the project that's at stake. If we're talking about the waterfront, again, there needs to be open communications, not with just the councils and the mayor, but it also has to bring the current property owners down along the water. Need to have it with the harbor management. There needs to be collaboration with everyone. I know there's a plan that's been in place for 7, 8 years. I know there's been a lot of lawsuits go back and forth. But in order, I truly believe the new administration may have better luck with negotiating and maybe getting this project going quicker. The Brimble Lab project, I mean, there's pros and cons to that project. You know, we're putting estimates of what tax revenue is going to be, but until it's built, we don't know what's going to be, you know, on the sea, you know, the property there. Downtown's being addressed. That's part of the Beverly Main Street initiative. They are addressing it, planting trees, trying to bring in more businesses, more foot traffic. They're addressing the Rantoul Street project, which that's going to be worked on within the next year or so, I believe, with the interchange and the changing of the intersection. So there's a lot going on within the city with growth. I mean, there's certain places you really can't grow anymore. You can't get to 1A. You know, you get the Sam Fonzo Drive. There's still commercial property up in that area that, you know, you try to entice businesses to come into the city. I know the TIF's in place, which is helping with downtown area businesses to expand their properties if they want to.
So do you think that we have real tourist possibilities in Beverly? Can we ever be do you think we can be a tourist destination like some of our neighbors, Salem, Newburyport, Gloucester? I actually went through Newburyport the other day. I didn't even recognize it.
Unfortunately, you know, there's been debate about this amongst local area business owners. We'll never be a Salem or a Newburyport. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have that actual building infrastructure which, you know, attracts. You get tourism from Salem, you get the witches, you get the custom house, you get things that are already in place there. That, granted, it was faltering, and they did a great job turning it around the last 10 years. I think where we may be able to focus ourselves is we have an art school in the downtown area. We have a beautiful Cabot Cinema. We have the Lockham. And maybe the arts way, we're not going to be the same destination location as that, but there are restaurants. I think we need to hopefully attract some sort of, retail boutiques type shops in there to not just be restaurants to be the only thing down there. I mean, we have secondhand stores. But I think there's potential to have some tourism. I think maybe we should look into crossing over to Salem during the Halloween and promotionalizing our restaurants, because the residents don't always like to be there. So there are means that we may be able to do. And I believe, Jen Wallace does great with Beverly Main Street. She works her heart out to, promote the downtown area with all the different programs that she's doing. So to be a Salem or a Newburyport, no, we'll never be there. I think if we develop the waterfront correctly, properly, that will help to draw people, because people like to go to Derby Wharf. I mean, I know in the summertime, for me, I slow down because you don't want to be in the heart of Beverly with no waterfront. You want to be on Newburyport water. You want to be in Salem. You want to be in Gloucester or Essex or what have you. So those are things I think we need to really start concentrating, and hopefully we can do that within the next several years.
So you have talked about the Brimble Avenue project, but more specifically, what are the pros and cons of that project?
Well, the pros are obviously its economic development, which will add to the tax basis. Also, that the safety issues are being addressed. I don't know how much traffic will truly. I know they throw numbers out there. I don't think those numbers are realistic. I think there's going to be more traffic than what they're stating. Those are two of the major pros. The cons, depending on how you, as a business owner, I will be slightly affected by it. If they put 4 restaurants in, that's 4 more restaurants. The Whole Foods would affect some of your smaller boutique shops, some other stores. It will increase traffic. It will affect the people who live up in that area when getting in and out of their neighborhoods. So those are really the cons. Like I said, the 2 pros, in my opinion, are the tax development that it will add to the city, and the safety issue of the interchange. And the cons, in my opinion, is for businesses, is it's going to make it a little harder for me to compete, because if they put, say, 4 restaurants up there, that's 4 places I have to compete with, even more so for the share of the business within the city. And again, people getting out, you drive 1A on a Saturday or on a rush hour at 5 o'clock, and it's a nightmare. You look for every means to go around not to be down in that area.
So if elected, you will be involved in this project. This is a big project for the next administration. What have you learned from observing what's happened in the last few months?
In regards to the project? Or?
This particular, the Brimble Avenue.
I'm fortunate enough that I was able to speak with the person who's representing the company. And so I got a lot of insight information from him explaining to me. And I think originally, and again, I haven't had I have spoken with some Ward 5 residents that come into the restaurant, and I know where they stand. But I think if it gets explained better, when people were opposing the interchange, the swapping of the land, it didn't really affect the project of the buildings itself. That was being approved. It was just swapping land. Whether the scope would have been a little smaller or whatnot, it still was going to get built regardless. So I think if we can take control of the situation and, go to a planning board meeting and just say, hey, can we change it this way? We've changed plans. This high school right here, plans are completely different the way the sprawling out was. It was a gentleman in the neighborhood, I believe was from Windover, and came up with a different plan altogether and proposed it. And they worked on it differently. So it can be done by neighbors. That was a neighborhood that was going to be affected by the whole way the playing fields were and stuff like that.
Former McKay School. It's been sitting. What would you do with that?
Okay, so Cummings gave the city of Beverly an acre of land out by the train tracks, and I believe that was when the Cummings Center was built. And that is to be used for a public safety department, police, fire. Now, during the time when this was all proposed and there was public meetings and everything, there was a lot of contention amongst the train tracks, the traffic lights, and so there was a little unfavoritism to really put it there. Now, the McKay School, and I've had this discussion with my brother for the last several years, I think that could be used as a police station. I know they've looked at it right now. We have a piece of property that I believe we have to insure. It's deteriorating. It's got plenty of land. It's not near any real railroad tracks. You got 128. It's almost centrally located. I think that would make a great police station. You can put a Sally Port onto that. It would alleviate a lot of the downtown parking issues for the police department because there's no parking lots. There's no parking. And in reality, it's going to be a domino effect if they could actually use the McKay for the police department. Because what's going to happen is where there's offices at the Memorial School, those offices have to move because that's where they're going to be putting the new middle school. So now where do we put that? Where do we put all the building departments and all that? Why don't we move them down to the old police station? And now they're all centrally located in City Hall. So it's almost like you can take 3 pieces of property and just move around. I know it's going to cost money, and that's something that really has to be investigated, but we own these properties already. So that's how I feel about the McKay building. It's sitting there deteriorating. We, I believe, self-insure it. I mean, I know at one time they were using it for training for the sheriff's department and stuff like that. But the windows are falling, the walls are falling down. So it's getting to a point now it's just complete disarray.
And you have talked about the waterfront, but specifically what needs to be done to develop the waterfront and how high of a priority should that be?
I think it's been a high priority for a while now. And again, like I said, one piece of property, one restaurant is not going to make that a very vibrant waterfront. It will attract some people. You know, if you get 200 seats, you get 200 people coming in on a Friday night. But you need other things, you know, like you go up to Manchester and they have those paddle boats. So you do rentals and stuff like that. You look into having area rentals for paddle boats or rowboats or even motorboats. You work with the current owners and see what they've already proposed a plan years ago. See if it's still something that can work into a master plan for that whole waterfront. So it is a high priority. It's a way of growing our tax. It's a way of, you know, as you just said, can we be a destination location? Maybe not in the same scale as Salem or Newburyport, but we definitely can draw more people in than what we have down the waterfront now. So.
New police and fire. How high of a priority? I think how high of a priority is that for you? And then you have the other thing is what are the options? But I think you've touched on that. But in terms of priority,
have you been in the police department? I have.
No, I know.
The police department is really. Listen, I remember not too long ago the cells down below were flooding. They had files that they couldn't store. You know, they've done some renovations to it for safety reasons, really, and they put tempered glass so they, you know, if someone comes in off the street, not try, you know, meeting rooms that they've built to help alleviate some of it. But that station wasn't built for that amount of patrolmen. That's, I mean, let's be realistic. They've outgrown it, but they've done all they can to try to maintain what they have. The fire stations, I mean, we have Central. Again, I mean, fire station's not as high of a priority, which maybe it should be, but I think we're hearing more and more about the police station than anything. And I definitely think it's one of the top priorities that should be really, I mean, I think right after the middle school, that should be our next priority. I can't see why the McKay School couldn't be, why that property could not be used for a new police station. I you know, can't say that it's because it's in a residential area, because Danvers has this in a residential. Peabody has it in a residential. It's very common. It's just in a better location with more property involved. I mean, come and give them back their land. Let them develop it. We'll collect more tax dollars off of what they develop there.
Okay, so, you know, this is a big role you're running for, and very important to the city. So why should I and our viewers vote for you?
I think I bring a very good perspective to the table. As I said, I've been a business owner for 20 years. I am heavily involved within the school systems. I am involved in the downtown itself. I come across a lot of people that come into the restaurant where I hear a lot of issues. So I'm very well informed of what's going on. I think that I will be a great voice for the people who, you know, if there's an issue, they come to me. I'll make sure you're heard. I will be there. I will make sure I'm open. And again, you may not always like my answer, you may not always agree with me, but at least I'm going to be honest with you. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to find it for you. I will go searching for it, whether it go to the state, the federal, wherever it needs to be found. I will find that answer. I have done it in the past with other roles that I've served. I will continue doing it that way.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. And I want to thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
For those of you that missed the beginning of the show, this is Todd Rotondo. He's running for Councilor at Large. And on behalf of BevCam
Thank you very
and
much.
myself, I thank you very much for coming in and sharing your views with us and the voters.
Thank you for having me.